All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin. Let's thank our sponsor, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Max and Brenda Lapkovsky, in honor of Yitzhak Meir's upcoming Bar Mitzva. Dr. Riva Mitzner, in commemoration of the first yartzheit of her father, Dr. Larry Schneck, Aryeh ben Chaim, Zichron Livracha, and Jack Bennett, in honor of Sargent COmer Tviv, who was killed by a Hamas Anti-Tank Missile on the Gaza border, May 12th, 2021. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. And with that, let us begin. We have, Baruch Hashem, a new parak today ahead of us. Incredibly exciting. Sorry, a little better? Good. Excellent. So let's begin. Today's daf is Chaf Aleph, 21. And we are picking up in Yirtzeit Hashem on Chaf Amud Beis 20b at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says as follows. We've actually referenced this Mishnah before a little bit, but we're going to focus on it in greater depth now into tomorrow as well. If a person sleeps underneath a bed in his sukkah, he has not fulfilled his obligation. So let's take a look at Rashi. What's happening over here? Lo yatsa, the ohel mafsik beino l'sukkah, the ikar yeshivas hasukkah achila shtia v'shena. So there's a couple of things happening in this Rashi. So first of all, what's the problem with sleeping underneath the bed inside of the sukkah? What's the problem? The problem is that you're not sleeping in the sukkah. Essentially, what the Mishnah is looking at it as that the area under the bed is its own ohel. That's an ohel. And therefore, when I sleep under the bed, I'm sleeping in an ohel that is not the sukkah. And therefore, ultimately, again, I'm not yotzei. Now, it's interesting that he uses lashon of hayashin tachas hamita. Rashi just points out over here, just to understand, this case is not limited to sleeping under the sukkah. The same halacha would be if what? If you ate underneath the bed. If you ate underneath the bed, or if you went ahead and you drank underneath the bed, it's just using this case of sleeping. Why? Pipashtos is the most common case of what you would be doing underneath a bed. Good. So the Gemara says as follows. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. So that's the opinion of the Rabban of the Tanakama. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda. No agin hayinu shayinu yeshenim tachas amita b'fnei hazakenim v'lo amru lanu davar. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, the truth is, we used to sleep underneath the bed in the presence of the zakenim, in the presence of the elders, and no one ever said anything to us. V'lo amru lanu davar. So we'll say Rabbi Yehuda is obviously arguing on the Tanakama, and he's holding that halacha l'maisa, even if you slept underneath the bed, it's okay. And here's what's interesting. His raya to that is, we did it, and what? No one said anything. So I'll say, what a powerful musar. That, it's interesting in life, there is this dialectic or dynamic, that sometimes when you see people doing certain things, you're not supposed to say anything. Right? Again, we all know people who comment on everything, and generally people who comment on everything, their comments are worth nothing. But it is important to know that sometimes when we don't comment on something, it's shtika koda, that silence is acquiescence. And this is incredibly important in chinuch as well. Sometimes, with our children do things that may not be so wonderful, and sometimes a parent has to know that even if my kid is not doing exactly what they should be doing, don't say anything. You can't comment on every single thing. On the flip side, there are certain things that my child does that I have to say something. Because if I don't say something, my child interprets that silence as permission, or that silence as acquiescence. So this is the great balance in life, right? Knowing when to say something, when not to say something, but recognizing that the price of silence is that it is often interpreted as a stempel, as a seal of kashrus, as acquiescence. Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't know what you're talking about. We used to sleep underneath the bed in the presence of the Chachamim, and the Chachamim never said anything. All right, so the Gemara goes right to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon comes along and says as follows. He says, so this is great. Rabbi Shimon says, there was a story, an episode with Tavi. Tavi was the Eved Kinani of Rabbi Gamliel. Right, so again, remember, Eved Kinani means non-Jewish, taken as a servant by a Jew, An Eved Kanani undergoes what we call a quasi-conversion process. It's a gerus l'shem avdus. What's his status? He's quasi-Jewish. What's his mitzvah status? Essentially the same as an isha, the same as a woman, which means that he's obligated in mitzvahs, but potter from mitzvos asay shazman grama. So Tavi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel, shahaya yoshin tachas hamita, he was sleeping underneath the bed. Va'amar Rabbi Gamliel, so Tavi was in the sukkah, sleeping underneath the bed. And Rabbi Gamliel said to the Zakanim, Re'isem, Tavi avdi, shu Talmid Chacham. Said, don't you see, Tavi, my servant, he's such a big Talmid Chacham. Why is he Talmid Chacham? Ve'odeya sha'avodim piturim min sukkah. You see, my servant Tavi, he's such a big Talmid Chacham, he knows that avodim are potter from sukkah. Therefore, what? Lefichach, yashin hu tachas hamita. So what is he doing to show that he's potter from sukkah? He's sleeping underneath the bed. He's sleeping underneath the bed. So apparently, Tavi was dafka sleeping underneath the bed in order to make a statement that what? You're not yotzei sukkah by sleeping underneath the bed. Now he was able to make that statement because he wasn't obligated in sukkah. Ulefi darchinu lamanu shayoshin tachas hamita lo yotzei dechavasa. And therefore, again, based on this episode, we learn that halacha l'maisa, that one who sleeps underneath the bed ultimately is not yotzi the mitzvah of sukkah. But say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, "Ma'aseh b'tavi avdo va'avod b'tura min sukkah the mitzvah sasei shazman grama nashim p'turos v'chol sha'isha chayeves eved nami chayeves." Okay, we just mentioned that before. Ulefi dachin lamad. Rashi says, "Kilomar afa pishalo amar lanu l'shem limud." Ela l'sichas chulin ba'alma shahaya mishtabeach ba'avdo lebedichusa ba'alma labmadnu api derech bedichuso sheyashin ta'achasimita lo yatz dechvasna. We'll see why this is important. But Rabbi Gamliel was not actually issuing a halachic directive. Rabbi Gamliel was just talking. Was just having a conversation. He was having a conversation about Tavi, his servant. But from the conversation regarding the milas of Tavi, the servant, we see ultimately an important halacha, namely that if you sleep underneath the bed, you are not yotzei the mitzvah of sukkah. Good. So we'll say, so therefore, this is machlokes in Mishnah. Simply put, Tanakama holds that halacha l'maaseh, if a person sleeps underneath the sukkah, they're not yotzei, because you're sleeping in the ohel of the bed, not in the ohel of the sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda holds you are yotzei if you sleep underneath the bed. And again, his raya is that we did this in front of the Chachamim and no one said anything to us. Rabbi Gamliel brings up his story of Tavi. Good. Says the Gemara. Both says, so this gets very exciting. Says the Gemara. So here's what's interesting. Let's go back for just a moment. Let's assume, what are the minimum dimensions of an ohel? What are the minimum? So let's think about this for just a second. A sukkah, to a certain degree, sometimes is categorized as an ohel, sometimes it's categorized as a bayis. What are the minimum dimensions of a sukkah? Minimum dimensions? Zayin by zayin and 10 tefachim high. So the Gemara comes from the following perspective. If you're going to tell me that sleeping underneath a bed is problematic because the bed effectively is an ohel, and therefore you're sleeping in the ohel of the bed, not the ohel of the sukkah, then what should the bed require? 10 tefachim. 10 tefachim of height. Now the Gemara is working under the assumption the bed doesn't have 10 tefachim. Now I will say, not that 10 tefachim of height is so much later. A tefach is 3 inches, right? Approximately 3 inches. Hey, so remember, again, it's not like you're dealing with so much height, but bepashtos, there's not 10 tefachim of airspace underneath the bed, to which the Gemara is, V'alaka asara, Tirgama Shmuel, B'mita Asara. Shmuel comes to the rescue, and he says, no, talking about a bed that has 10 tefachim. Okay, so that's the case of the Mishnah, where the area underneath the bed has 10 tefachim of height, therefore it constitutes an ohel. Tanan Hassam, so we'll say this is a fascinating sugya. So we learn there, the Gemara says, in Meseches Ohalos, Echad chor shechararuhu mayim. So we'll say, listen to this case. We're talking over here about open areas that were hollowed out naturally. So, for example, let's say you have a chor. Chor is a hole, but if you could imagine, what we're really imagining of is not just a hole, but what's the right word? Like a crevice. like a crevice, a cavity, an open area that was hollowed out by water. O shratzim, or an area that was burrowed out, let's say by animals. O sha'achaltu malachas, or an area that was hollowed out by minerals, like the rim minerals themselves eroded the dirt. V'chein midbach avanim, so too again if you have a pile of stones, and the way the stones fell was that there is a natural opening, a natural cavity inside of the stones. Or the Gemara says, v'chein savar shel koros, or you have a stack of boards, but the way the boards are stacked is that there is an internal open area, an internal cavity. So I'll say, so just the imagery that's being pointed over here is an open area that was created naturally, right? Naturally. So what's the halacha? Mahil al hatuma. All of these areas serve as an ohel for tumah purposes. So let's take a step back for just a moment. Remember Hilchos Tumah 101, which is, how does tumah spread? How does tumah spread? Up. Well, the truth is up and out, depending on where the tumah is housed, right? But so let's say if you have tumah in a container, right? So that container, so everything depends on what? The amount of space above the tumah. What's the halacha? If you have a tefach or more of space above the tumah, then what happens? Tumah's contained. Now, it's true the tumah is contained, but what does happen to the tumah? It spreads out, right? It goes to the sides. Less than a tefach of space on top of the tumah, Tumah ola ubakas. Tumah will go up. The case over here is as follows. You have tumah contained in a cavity, right? In an area that was naturally formed. So I'll say, so that's all of these cases, right? You have an area that was hollowed out by water, or an area that was hollowed out by animals, or by minerals, or stones fell, and they created a natural cavity. And you have tumah inside of it. So the Gemara says, Ma'il ala tumah. Fine, that naturally made cavity could act as an OL, which then means what? If there is a tefach of space between the tumah and the top of the cavity, the top of the enclosure, the tumah is contained. Beautiful. Rabbi Huda Omer, no. Rabbi Huda disagrees. He says, also listen to this rule. Kol ohel she'enu asui b'dei adam eino ohel. This is incredible. Rabbi Huda holds that in order for an ohel to contain tumah, it must be man-made. And if it's not man-made, it does not contain tumah, even if what? There's a tefach of space. Right? An incredible halacha. So my time with Rabbi Huda, what's Rabbi Huda's logic? Top of Chaf Aleph, Yalif ohel mi Mishkan. Both says incredible. He learns that Gzera Shava of ohel from Mishkan. Sivhach, it says over here, Zos Torah Sa'adam Kiya Muspa Ohel. So it says by the pasuk in Tumah, Parshas Chukas, right? These are the halachos if a person will die inside of an Ohel, Tumas Ohel. Uksiv Hasam, and he quotes over here the pasuk from Vayifros Es HaOhel Al HaMishkan Shmos, right? He went ahead and he placed the Ohel over the Mishkan. We'll say, in this context, Ohel actually means the roof of the Mishkan. He placed the roof over the Mishkan. Malahalon. So we'll say, just like Ohel, by the Mishkan. Malahalon bidei Adam. Afkan bidei Adam. Just like over here, right? By the Mishkan itself. This is a Mishkan that is man-made. So too over here, when it comes to Tumah, this is a Mishkan, this is an Ohel that is man-made. So this is the incredible sheet of Rabbi Huda that we are going to spend a little bit of time on, which is really incredible, which is that halach lamaisa, the only type of Ohel which contains Tumah is a man-made Ohel. If it's a naturally formed Ohel, which was all of the cases we saw beforehand, halach lamaisa, those naturally formed cavities do not contain Tumah. Where did they learn it out from? Gezerah Shava Ohel from the Mishkan. Just like the Mishkan was man-made, so too an Ohel which contains Tumah must be man-made as well. Incredible. V'Rabbanon, Ohel, Riba. So we'll say, the Rabbanon will say that the repeated use of the word Ohel comes to include what? All types of Ohalim. Right? All types of Ohalim. Because we'll say the pasuk that he's referring to over here is that the pasuk in Parashas Chukas reads as follows: Zos haTorah, Adam kiomus ba'ohel, kol haba el ha'ohel, v'chol asher ba'ohel. The pasuk repeats the word ohel 3 times in the pasuk containing tumah. The Rabbanan understand. Excuse me. Good. The Rabbanan understand that repeated use of the word. I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you, sir. The Rabbanan understand that repeated use of the word tumah comes to what? That repeated use of the word ohel comes to include all different types of oilim. Whatever structure you have, a man-made structure, a naturally formed structure. So we'll say, isn't this incredible? It's like, you know how sometimes you have a day. A lot, we learn things, beautiful things every day in Daf Yomi. But I would venture to say that most days, what we learn, we've heard of in some way, shape, or form before. I would venture to say that we've never heard this machlokes before. Right? I'm saying, it's fascinating. Sometimes no matter how much you learn, you come across a piece of information, right? A little nugget, a little morsel of Torah that mamish you never ever heard before, and it's so exciting, and it just teaches you how vast Torah is. You could learn every single day, right? From years and years and years, and then you stumble upon something. Wow! So major machlokes. What type of ohel contains tumah? Rabbi Huda says only a man-made ohel. The Rabbanon say no, even a naturally made ohel. Incredible. So we'll say, so why is this important for us? Get ready. V'sav Rabbi Huda kol ohel she'ino asei b'dei adam eino ohel. Does Rabbi Huda really hold that any ohel that is not man-made is not an ohel? So the Gemara says, or minu arei kasha. Rabbi say, I have to tell you this. We're going to now look at a Mishnah in Mesechus Para. Close over here also has the Gemara Mesechus Zvachim. This is an absolutely amazing Mishnah. Listen to this. Chatzeros hayu benuyos b'Yerushalayim al gabe sela v'tachtehem chala. They used to build. Listen to this. They used to build courtyards in Yerushalayim on top of the bedrock. On top of the bedrock, like I mentioned yesterday, I mentioned this in the Smichas Chavashir. Let's say in these days when most of us don't yet have the opportunity to go to Eretz Yisrael, so whenever you come across something that has to do with Eretz Yisrael, you have to savor it. Because, for now, for many of us, myself included here, this is your connection to Eretz Yisrael, right? When we have a piece of Torah that connects us to Yerushalayim, grab it and savor it. It's part of our chibas haaretz. So listen to this. They would make courtyards in Yerushalayim on top of the bedrock. V'tachtehem chala. Now watch this. So they would create these communities. They would build a little community, we'll see why, a chutzner on top of the bedrock. But they wouldn't build the chutzner right on top of the bedrock. Instead, what would they do? They would add an additional tefach of space underneath the chutzner. So if you can imagine, you can't build directly on bedrock. What do you have to do? You have to fill the area. So listen, just to illustrate this, for example, the kosel. Right, the kosel, that's not a wall of the Beis Hamikdash. That's one of the retaining walls that Herod built around Harabayis, right? Because at the end of the day, Harabayis is a mountain. It's hard to build a structure on top of a mountain because you don't have a lot of flat space. You ever look down, right? If you ever go on Har HaZeisim and you look down on Harabayis, so it's a whole flat area. That's not the natural topography of Harabayis. But if you take walls, tall walls, you build them around the mountain, fill in the mountain with earth, flatten the area, now you have an entire plaza to build on. So if you could imagine, they're building a chutzner in Yerushalayim on top of the bedrock. So what do? You bring your retaining walls, you fill in the dirt, you put a chutzner, you build the chutzner on top of it. But they would purposely leave a tefach of space underneath the chutzner. Why would they do that? They would do that, listen to this, in the event that there was a corpse buried underneath the bedrock, that tefach of space would do what? What would it do? It contains the tumah. Now both say, what is the statistical probability of a corpse being buried underneath bedrock? Right? Virtually zero. Both say it's bedrock. Bedrock means pretty much you're getting to like the undisturbed area, the undisturbed subterranean area. But we're going to see, by the way, why they were doing this. So they would create this man-made opening of a tefach in order to contain the tumah. So listen to this. Who are they making this for? You ready? Umavian nashim ubros violdos sham. They would go ahead and bring pregnant women to live there, and the women would give birth there. Umegadlos benehem sham lepara, and they would raise children there. For these children, their mission, their job, was to be involved in the process of para aduma. Para aduma. Now we'll say, before you think it's good, wait, we're going to look at Rashi. Look at Rashi just a moment. Mipnei kevrat home. Rashi says, Sham kol shem kevrat home utumas atom shebishas lashon safeku kit home shenagad mipnei kevrat home shall kol ha'ir hayu misupakin shem yesham kever ve'ein lo lemeis chalal tefach v'tumashi rituz b'gas. I just want to point out, obviously, they were doing this as a chumrah. Right? Remember again, kever to home is a descriptive term for a general concern that maybe there is a corpse buried underneath this area. Now remember again, because they're building on the bedrock, the statistical probability of there actually being a corpse underneath is nil. Now look at Rashi. You're both say this takes us back, but you know what's also very exciting about this? It's going to take us back to the beginning of Maseches Yuma. Look at the next Rashi, Mevi'in Nashim Ubros. This is a very important Rashi. Mishumahi Disnan. Here we go. Both say, just to give you the background as to why they were doing this. Mitamin hayu esakoin asaref esapara umatbilin oso miyad. Reading in Rashi, la hotzi miliba shel tztukin shayu omrim b'me'orvei hashemesh. I'm sorry, shayu omrim b'me'orvei hashemesh haisenasis. V'cheivan detful yom kasher b'para. So we'll say, now listen to this. Remember again, we saw this in the beginning of Yuma. There was a major machlokes between the tztukim and the perushim about the permissibility of a tvul yom to do para aduma. Remember, what's a tvul yom? What's a tvul yom? Person becomes tameh, and then what? Goes to the mikvah, but requires hair of shemesh. The halacha is that even a kohen who is permitted to do who is a tvul yom, is permitted to do the service of the para aduma. The tzedukim, because they reject Torah shebal peh, so did not agree with this interpretation. So they did something dramatic in the Beis Hamikdash. To show that the tzedukim were wrong, what would they do? They would be metame the kohen who was doing the paraduma on the day he was to do the service. They would immerse him, and they would dafka have him do the paraduma service as a tvul yom, to show, to make a dramatic statement that the tzedukim are wrong. Now the problem with that is that what? What's the reverse concern? Now, if we're letting a kohen who's a tvul yom do the service of the paraduma, people may end up treating the service of para aduma lightly. So remember what was the countermeasure? They were ridiculously machmir in every other area. Right? Remember again, they would sequester the kohen. The 2 times we sequester a kohen. It's for Yom Kippur, for para aduma. They would only use what? Remember again, what kind of utensils? Little chazara? Stone and dung utensils, which are not mekabel tuma. So what's interesting is they were quote unquote mekel, although it's not really a kula, but they were metame and allowed them to be a tvul yom, but then imposed every other chumrah on the other end in order to maintain the proper, what's the right word? We'll call it reverence for this halachas. Let's finish Rashi. Rashi says, therefore, asu bo v'chilin to tvul yom kol shapara asu bo Milas harbe kadesh lo yizalzalu ba. So therefore, again, they made many other chumras in order that people will not treat para aduma lightly. So what did they do? The Gemara says, "Tiknu ba komaise para biklei gelalim uklei avanim." You have to use stone or dung utensils, uklei adama, earthenware, shema kalatuma. Vakoin hasarfa his kiku leprishas shilas yamim. The kohen who was going to do the avoda was sequestered for 7 days. Ve'ein echav hakohanim nogin bo. No one was allowed to touch him. Kidamina parakama de yuma va'amar mar mazon alav kol shiva. They would sprinkle upon him waters of paraduma all 7 days. The Gemara says, "V'tiknu shitunokos halalu memalin mayim lekadish ban mechatos mishum mala tiknu shitohore mikol tuma b'doset shninu achi." Supposed to listen to this. So part of the maila, part of the chumrah that they imposed on paraduma was what? Only these kids, only these children who were raised in this special chutzner were the ones. Now, what was their job? Their job was to go ahead and draw the water from the Shiloach spring, right? The water for the, also if you ever take the Ir David tours, when you walk through the water tunnels, that water comes from the Shiloach, right? So you go ahead and the children who drew that water were these children from this chatzar. This was part of the Maila of Para Aduma. So the Gemara says, "Ubitosefta shaninu ad sheyihu b'nei shiva u'b'nei shmona shana megalden osan v'lo yoser shelo ra'u keri." Children who were raised in this specialized chatzar were only there until the age of 7 or 8. Because after 7 or 8, again, we assume that up until the age of 7 or 8, we assume that a child does not experience any type of seminal emission. But already after 7 or 8, there's the possibility of seminal emission. Therefore, the child could easily become tamei in other ways. So we'll say, so this was the chatzar of the kids of Para Aduma. Yeah, absolutely incredible. So the Gemara says, go back to the Gemara. So what would happen? So they would take pregnant women, right, bring them there. The women would give birth. They would raise the kids there. And what would happen? Umegadlos b'nehem sham lepara. And they would raise their children for Para Aduma. Para Aduma. We'll say, also another incredible yesod in chinuch, that sometimes if a person wants to raise children bikdusha ubetara, sometimes you have to raise them in a metaphorical sequestered chatzar in Yerushalayim. I think that sometimes parents erroneously think that the best thing they could do for their children is exposure. I want my children to know about the world. Your children will know about the world, and they're going to know about the world much sooner than we ever want them to know about the world. Sheltering our children, especially when they're young, is the most important avoda that a parent could do for a child. Again, it doesn't mean sheltering in a harmful way, but creating a protective cocoon of holiness is absolutely incredible. Otherwise, kids don't have a fighting chance, because the world is filled with so much tumah, and the world is filled with so much impurity, and the world is filled with so much negativity. If you just give your children unfiltered, unfettered access to everything, then I can't be surprised when they don't make the right decisions in life. If you want children who are going to live b'kedusha b'tara, there has to be a specialized chatzar, a metaphorical specialized chatzar in Yerushalayim to raise them in that way. So the Gemara goes weiter. So what happens? Listen to this. This is wild. So now the kids are going to do the water of the paraduma. So what happens? Umaviyim shvarim. They would bring oxen, va'agabe, and delasos. You have to imagine this. They brought oxen, and there were doors. They placed a door on the top of the ox. Vitinokos yoshun al gabein. The kids would sit on top of the doors. Now, both saying, now, why are they bringing doors? So remember again, what does the door do? The door, if you can imagine, you put the door perpendicular to the ox. So what that does is, if there's any tumah anywhere, let's say the kid leans over this way, the kid leans over that way, the door itself acts as a barrier to tumah. What happens? V'kozo shel even biyadehen, and they're holding glasses of stone, or stoneware. Like we said before, stone's not makabel tumah. Hegil l'shiloach. When they get to the shiloach spring, yardu l'soch hamayim. They go ahead and they go into the water. Umilum. And they go ahead and they go to the water. Fill up the utensils. Remember again, for Para Aduma, this is the Mayim Chaim. Va'alu v'yashulam. And they go back and they sit on top of the ox. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, they wouldn't get off the ox. Rather, no, we don't want those kids getting off the ox. Because they will say, what happens after you get off the ox? Everyone knows. The moment you get off the ox, anything could happen. Anything could happen after you. Stay on the ox. Good eights in life. Stay on the ox. And therefore, again, what would they do? They would lower the utensils from the top of the ox, draw the water like that. I would say, also, such an incredible yesod. In life, you could plan, then suddenly you get off the ox. Right? And everything breaks loose, right? And everything happens. So sometimes, so much of success in life is about staying the course. You started in the chutzner, stay on the ox. The moment you get off the ox, the moment you break your concentration, is the moment that things kind of go off the rails. So Rabbi Yossi says, no one's getting off the ox. Rather, again, lower the stoneware off, and draw the water like that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and our boss, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda said, Lo hayu mevi'in delasos. They didn't have doors. They did not have doors on top of the oxen. Ella shvarim So Ela Shvarim. Supposed to listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda said the shar itself acts as a natural ohel. As we're going to see, these were wide-bellied oxen, right? So the wide-bellied oxen, the ox itself acted as an ohel, and therefore, again, even if the ox itself, so we'll say the assumption was you want the door there because let's say the ox passes over a kever, right? Inadvertently. This way, again, the door acts as a barrier because this is, you don't need the doors. The ox counts as a barrier. So the Gemara says, but one second. Now remember again, we're going to try to link everything back together. What did Rabbi Yehuda say on the bottom of Chaf Amud Beis? What type of ohel is chotzetz b'fnei atumah? Only what? A man-made ohel. The Gemara says, "V'hashvarim de'ohel sheina asei b'dei adamu v'katani." Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo hayim mavin delasas al shvarim. But one second, Rabbi Yehuda, you said that only a man-made ohel has the ability to be chotzetz b'fnei atumah, to serve as a barrier. And yet, obviously, an ox is not a man-made tumah. So, what's going on over here? Ki as Rabbi Dimi Amar Rabbi Lazar Mod Rabbi Yehuda Kimale Egrof. But say, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda holds that, in fact, if the cavity, if the open area, or we'll call it, if the ohel is at least the size of an egrof. Now, we'll say Rashi says egrof literally means what? A fist. Rashi says what it actually means is the size of a head. The size of the head, right? If the oil itself is at least the size of a head, halacha l'maisa, even Rabbi Yehuda holds that if it's naturally formed, it'll be chotzetz b'fnei atumah. In other words, then when Rabbi Yehuda said that a naturally formed ohel is not chotzetz b'fnei atumah, he meant only if it's smaller than the size of a head. But halacha l'maisa, if it's a head or larger, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that a man-made ohel, that a naturally formed ohel is chotzetz b'fnei atumah. We have a brayso that supports this. Umod Rabbi Yehuda b'shkifin u'b'nikiki aslaim. So we'll say that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with shkifin. Rashi says shkifin are slam. If you have boulders that fall, right, and the boulders fall, and the way they fall on top of each other is they create a cavity. Rabbi Yehuda holds that naturally formed cavity, if more than the size of a head, or we'll use lashon of egrof, halacha l'maisa, that will work. That'll be a ohel, which is chotzetz b'fnei atumah. So we'll say a little bit of a qualification to Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Even though Rabbi Yehuda said before that in order for an ohel to be chotzetz b'fnei atumah, it has to be man-made, he will agree that if it's large enough, what's large enough? Larger than the size of a head, even if it's naturally formed, halacha l'maisa, it will be chotzetz b'fnei atumah. And the Gemara says as follows: Umod Rabbi Yehuda b'shkivin right b'harei delas diyesh b'kama egrofin v'katan Rabbi Yehuda lo hayim aviin delasas el shvarim. But one second, then why does Rabbi Yehuda have a problem with the doors? What's wrong with the doors? Right? After all, again, I will say when the door forms an ohel, right? Remember, the door is forming an ohel over what? Over the ground. There's a lot of space there. A number of head spaces there. So why would Rabbi Yehuda have a problem with a door ohel? To which the Gemara says, no. Rabbi Yehuda is okay with the door ohel. Rather, what is Rabbi Yehuda saying? What was he saying? You don't need the door. Why don't you need the door? Why not? Because you have the ox. That's what he was saying. It's not that the door doesn't work, right? Rabbi Yehuda is just saying, I'm saving you work. You don't need the door because the ox itself could serve as the ohel for the child on top of it. So Rava says, Lo hayim aviin delasas kol ikar. Rava says, Rabbi Yehuda, I agree with you, but for a different reason. Rava says, I'm against the doors. They would not bring the doors. Why not? Listen to this. Shemipnei shedaito shel tinok gasa alav. Shema yotzi rosha oecha me'avar v'tamei. Both listen to this. What's going to happen if you have a door? So remember again, a door gives the child on top what? A lot of extra space. So what's going to happen? He's a child. So what does a child naturally do? Look here, look there. So what's going to happen if the child has a nice flat sitting area? The child's going to look over this way, look over that way. And also remember again, one wrong move, what happens? Tumah. We'll say, by the way, what an incredible metaphor and such an important Lamaisa lesson for us in the age in which we live. You know, one of the hardest nisyonos, right? One of the hardest things to contend with in life is shmiras ha'inayim, right? Is going ahead and making sure that we don't look at inappropriate things. And isn't it an incredible musar, right? One wrong look this way, one wrong look that way. And suddenly what happens? Tumah. An incredible yisod, right? So the child positions himself this way, child positions himself that way, right? And suddenly again, daito shaltino gasa alav shemayotze rosha o echamevar v'yitma. So therefore, say, interestingly enough, Rava comes along and says that halacha l'maisa, no doors, not because they don't work, just the opposite. They work fine. But at the end of the day, we're concerned that the kid is going to go ahead and move himself around. Both say chafal on the days. So I'm sorry. Good. Tanya Kava say the Rava. We have a brayso that supports Rava. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo hay mavin delasas kalikar. Rabbi Yehuda said they would not bring doors at all. Why? Mipnei shadaito shaltino gasa alav shema yotzi rosho echam eivar v'yitma bekever hatahom. Good. So I'll say, so therefore again, Rava says, and apparently Rabbi Yehuda is on the same page as well, no doors. Again, why? According to Rabbi Yehuda, because you don't need doors. According to Rava, we don't want doors, because doors give the kids, so we'll say, see, I guess what the Gemara is saying is like this, Rava's position is like this. When a child is sitting on top of the ox, I guess I've never ridden an ox, but I have to imagine, it's on my bucket list, but I have to imagine as follows, which is you're sitting there, because as a child, you're unsure of right, it's not so stable. Because it's not so stable, what don't you do? Move around, right? And that's good. We don't want the kid moving around, we want the kid staying in space, in place. Because again, one wrong move, you reach over, suddenly again, the child can become tameh. And Joe will say, again, it's such a strong metaphor, because who is this child? This child was the child who was brought in utero to the specialized chutzner, and was born in this chutzner, and was raised b'kedusha b'tara, which also tells you something amazing, that halacha l'maisa, person could be born b'kedusha, could be raised b'kedusha, but yet what? It's no guarantee for the retention of that kedusha. Because even if you're born there, even if you're raised there, still one wrong move has the ability to divest a person of all their kedusha. We'll say, isn't it maisim b'chol yom for so many of us? I work so hard, and then I make a mistake. And what happens with the mistake? Again, see what happens. I feel like I've lost all my kedusha. It's not true. A Jew never loses all of his kedusha. But at the same time, I feel like I did. I worked so hard. I built myself up so much. I pushed myself so much. I overcame so much. And then again, one wrong move, one wrong positioning, one wrong look, and suddenly a person feels like they've lost all of that they've amassed. It's such an incredible yisod. Need for constant and ongoing vigilance. Ella. So we'll say, so because we don't want doors, what do we do? Chaf Aleph Hamadeis, 5 lines down from the top. Ella. Mavi'in Shvarim HaMitzrim Shekrisosehen Rechavos. So we'll say, what do we use? Egyptian oxen. Why Egyptian oxen? They're wide-bellied oxen. Wide-bellied Egyptian oxen, and therefore again, Vatinokos Yoshrin Al Gabehen. The children sit on top of the shar. V'kosos shal even biyadehen, and they're holding stone utensils. Higia l'shiloach. They get to the shiloach spring. Yardu umilum. They lowered the utensils. They fill it up. Va'alu, and they pull it back up. V'yashvu lahen al gabehen, and ultimately again they sit back on it. And again, we'll say the rest of the story is then what? Then again, ultimately, again, the water is brought to the Kohen Gadol, and the service of the Para Aduma is done. I will say, just such an incredible yisod, that if you want all of this, what? I will say, think about this, all of this to get a glass of water. All of this to get a glass of water. Because if you want a glass of water, b'kedusha u'b'tara, then all of the steps leading up to it have to be b'kedusha b'tara as well. It's such an incredible yisod. Kedusha, to live a life of Kedusha, to drink water of Kedusha, to do para aduma of Kedusha, requires me to take all of my steps, b'kedusha u'b'tara as well. And that is an avoda. It's just such an incredible yisod. We'll say back to the bed. V'harimita! Okay, so we'll say, so remember again, this was a real detour, but remember again, where are we coming from with this? Remember, hayashin tachas hamita. We write this Mishnah, you sleep underneath the bed. So Rabbi Yehuda said that halacha l'maisa, sleeping underneath the bed, right? Rabbi Yehuda holds that halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to sleep underneath the bed. Why? We'll say why? Because he holds it's not an ohel. Right? Remember, now Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say that in the Mishnah. All Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah is what? We slept underneath the bed and what? And what? No one said anything. But that's his position. It's not an ohel, therefore he can sleep. Now it makes sense. Why does Rabbi Yehuda hold that a bed is not an ohel? Why does he hold that way? Because we'll say ultimately again, Rabbi Yehuda holds any bed that's not made bidei adam any ohel that's not made bidei adam is not called an ohel. Now the Pashas Rabbi say a bed is not an ohel, right? It's not made bidei adam. I mean, a bed is made bidei adam, but it's not called an ohel that's made bidei adam. So if that's the case again, I now even said Rabbi Yehuda shita, but here's the problem: we qualify that. Rabbi Yehuda held that even if you have a naturally formed ohel, if it's at least how large, large enough for a head, that does count as an ohel. To which the Gemara says, well, 1 second, v'harei mita, de'esh bakama egrofin. Now, we'll say a bed is larger than a couple of heads. Utinan Rabbi Yehuda Omer noagin ayinu shayinu yishem tachas aminta b'fnei zakenim. But Rabbi Yehuda says that a bed's not an ohel, right? We slept underneath the bed in front of the elders and no one said anything to us. But again, even according to Rabbi Yehuda's logic, a bed should be an ohel. Even though what? It's not called bidei adam. Right? Because no one made that ohel for the sake of ohel, but it is still large enough for a couple of heads, and that should make it an ohel. To which the Gemara says, "Shani mita hoel ulegaba asuya." Bed's different. I will say why. Because a bed is not made to use the cavity underneath it. Rather, what is a bed made for? To use the top. So therefore, again, it does the underside of the bed does not have the status of an ohel. The Gemara says, 1 second. But 1 second, you just told me before that back to Paraduma, when the kids ride on top of the oxen, the ox serves as an ohel. Well, an ox, the bottom of an ox is not made for, right? An ox is not made for its underside either. But yet, again, you still allow it to function as an ohel. Ki asurav and Amar Belazar shani shvarim hoel umaginim alaroim becham meachama ubigishamim b'nei agishamim. Well, this is very interesting. No, oxen are made for use for its underside. How? Apparently, oxen provide shade for the shepherd during the heat and provide shelter for the shepherd during the rain. So you see that even the underside of the ox is used. I mean, you'd have to be pretty brave to seek shelter underneath an ox, right? But I guess, if you're the shepherd, you've developed a rapport with him. In any event, so the Gemara says as follows, but once again, it can be the same argument about the bed. The underside of the bed is also used. When is it used? How is it used? You put your shoes, you put your sandals underneath it. So the same way that the underside of the shar is used to provide shade for the shepherd, the underside of the bed, or the underneath area, underside of the bed is also used to go ahead and provide storage. To which the Gemara says, Allah Amarava, shiny shvarim. So the Gemara says, Hoyel asuyim lahagin al b'nei me'ayim shalahem. The Bible said it is very interesting. Shvarim are different because ultimately, again, the shar, the top of the shar, really what it's saying is the skeleton of the shar is there to protect its kishkas, right? The inner organs of the shar. Shnei amar, ar ubasar talbisheni, ubatzamos v'gidim tisochecheni. So we'll say when it comes to the skeleton, the atzamas, it uses the lashon of tisochecheni. A sukkah. Right, pasuk from Eov. So you see from here that the skeleton of the shar is considered to be like the roof, like the sukkah of its innards. So therefore, again, a shar is made ultimately, again, for use of the underside as well, as opposed to a bed that's not. V'baisema. But so the other possibility is there's a simpler answer. We'll say here is the conclusion of this sugya. V'baisema. Rabbi Yehuda tamei da'amar sukkah diras keva ba'inan. So we'll say Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah has to be a diras keva. Right, a sukkah has to be what we'll call a semi-permanent structure. And remember again, the bed is an ohel. But what type of ohel is a bed? What type of ohel is a bed? It's a diras arai, a temporary structure. V'sukkah ohel keva. So v'lo asi ohel arai umevatel ohel keva. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, I will say, that sukkah is a diras keva. Bed, or the underside of the bed, is an ohel arai. And an ohel arai cannot go ahead and what? Overtake or usurp an ohel keva. Therefore, when you sleep under the bed, essentially in Rabbi Yehuda's model, the bed is batel to the sukkah. Rabbi Shimon, the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon nami savar diras sukkah diras keva ba'inon. But Rabbi Shimon holds. Rabbi Shimon also agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, namely that the sukkah must be a semi-permanent structure. Va'asi oel aray mavatal oel keva. But yet, Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that if you sleep underneath the bed, then what? You're not yotzei sukkah. Why? Because we consider it as if you're sleeping underneath the sukkah sarai, the diras sarai of the bed, and not underneath the diras keva of the sukkah. To which the says, you're right. Baha pligi. That's gufa the machlokas. Rabbi say this is the machlokas. Mar savar asi ohel aray mavatal ohel keva. Umar savar lo asi ohel aray umevatel ohel keva. Rabbi say that is the machlokas. So Rabbi say bottom line is everyone is going to agree that the area underneath the bed is an ohel. So what's the machlokas? The machlokas is does the ohel aray of sukkah is the ohel aray of mita mevatel the ohel keva or the diras keva of sukkah? Rabbi Yehuda holds it is not, and therefore if you sleep underneath the bed, you are still yotzei, and Rabbi Shimon says it is, and therefore if you sleep underneath the bed, you are not yotzei. We both say, we'll see the halacha, we're not going to have time today, but I'll show you the halacha l'maisa with bed a little bit later on, but I'll say, but you have to admit, that piece on Paraduma, riveting, no? Riveting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I built it up enough in the WhatsApp message last night, which maybe nobody prepared themselves for this overwhelming tidal wave of exciting Torah, but incredible. I will say, we're going to see the Shulchan Aruch on beds in Miras Hashem tomorrow. Let's just finish up to the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon, Maiseh b'tavi avdo. So remember again, Rabbi Shimon then speaking about, Rabbi Shimon was talking about the story of Tavi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel, right? And Tavi Davka slept underneath the bed in order to show that ultimately, again, one is not yotzei the mitzvah of sukkah while sleeping underneath the bed. So the Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Shimon, Misichasol Rabbi Gamliel lamadu shnei devarim. Rabbi Shimon says, as Bryce says, a little bit different than the Mishnah, from the conversation of Rabbi Gamliel, we learned two things. Number one, lamadnu shavadim p'tura min sukkah. Number one lesson was avadim, right? And then also, obviously, this is Eved Kinani, not an Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri is Chayiv in Sukkah. But avadim Kinanim are pater from Sukkah. That's lesson number one. V'lamadnu shayosh in tachas hamita lo yotzei deichal baso. We also learned that what? If you sleep underneath the bed, you are not yotzei the mitzvah of Sukkah. So the Gemara says, "V'leima midvaro Rabbi Gamliel." So I'll say, if you look at the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon says, "Misichaso Rabbi Gamliel," from the conversation of Rabbi Gamliel. Why is it from the conversation? Why don't you just say midvarav? From the words of Rabbi Gamliel, we learn this. Why sichaso? To which the Gemara says something amazing. The Gemara says, "Milsa agavar kamasha." Because Rabbi Yeshua was teaching us another lesson. What was the lesson? Ki hada amrav achabar ada va'amrli amrav achabar ada amrav hamnuna amrav. How do you know that even the casual conversation of Talmidei Chachamim has what to learn from? Right? That even the casual conversation of Talmidei Chachamim has so much to teach us. Shenemar quotes the pasuk over here from Tehillim, Va'alehu lo yibol, that his leaf will not wither. Rashi says over here, what's the leaf? Rashi says, Davar kal shabo. We'll say, just like the leaf is not a primary part of the tree. It's only a little chilik, only a little piece of the tree. But the leaf doesn't wither, so too even the little things which come from Talmidei Chacham, the little things are reference to what? The casual conversations. Right? Even the casual conversations of a Talmid Chacham have so much to teach us. Rabbi Yeshua was dafka coming to go in and teach us this idea. Rabbi Gamliel was not engaged. Rabbi Yeshua, was not engaged. It's Rabbi Gamliel, right? Rabbi Gamliel was not engaged in a halachic discourse. Rather, what was he engaged in? Casual conversation. Therefore, when Rabbi Shimon goes in and conveys this, he dafka doesn't use lashon of midvarav, because dvarav can sound like what? A targeted halachic conversation. Instead, he uses lashon of misichaso. A sicha is the casual conversation. To teach Rabbi said that even from the casual conversations of Talmidei Chachamim, ultimately there is what to be learned. Rabbi say the message for us is even if a person is not a Talmid Chacham, so let's say I'm not a Talmid Chacham, so we'll say, but a person has to be careful even with their casual conversations, right? Even our casual conversations should be conversations of meaning. Or in other words, better not to engage in conversations that have no depth or meaning to them. Because even the Talmid Chacham models for us that whenever you talk, your words should be filled with meaning, and your words should ultimately be filled with purpose. All right, so we'll stop over here. We'll pick up Amir the Mishnah tomorrow. Shkoyach.